Here's a shocking truth that just rocked Silicon Valley. Google's legal team pulled off what many thought was impossible, and it might have secretly saved Apple from one of its biggest nightmares yet. Tuesday's courtroom drama delivered a plot twist that sent shockwaves through the tech world. While everyone expected Google to face devastating consequences in its historic antitrust battle, Judge Mehta handed down a surprisingly lenient ruling that kept Google's empire largely intact. The search giant gets to maintain control over Chrome and Android, and here's the kicker. It can still shower other companies with cash to feature its search engine prominently. But here's where it gets controversial. This wasn't just a win for Google. Apple, sitting quietly on the sidelines, just dodged what could have been a corporate catastrophe. Think about this for a moment. Google has been paying Apple an astronomical sum estimated at $20 billion annually as of 2022, just to remain the default search option on iPhones, iPads, and Macs. That's not pocket change. That's a revenue stream that significantly impacts Apple's bottom line. The ruling means this lucrative arrangement can continue flowing uninterrupted, and this is the part most people miss. Apple was potentially facing a nightmare scenario that would have forced them to answer an incredibly difficult question. With billions of Apple devices scattered across the globe, what search engine would they pre-install if Google was no longer an option? The timing couldn't have been worse for such a dilemma. Apple is already juggling multiple challenges, wrestling with European Union regulations that are reshaping their profitable App Store business model, and struggling to catch up in the artificial intelligence race that's rapidly transforming how we interact with technology. Dan Ives, a respected analyst at Wedbush Securities, captured the market sentiment perfectly when he described this as a black cloud worry that had been hanging over Apple's stock. Investors were genuinely concerned about the possibility of Google's Chrome division being split off, or the search partnership being forcibly terminated. The market's reaction spoke volumes about the relief felt across both companies. Apple's shares jumped more than 3% on Wednesday, while Google's stock absolutely soared, climbing nearly 9%. These aren't just numbers. They represent billions in market value and investor confidence being restored. Now, let's put Google's dominance into perspective for those who might not realize just how massive their reach truly is. According to StatCounter Global Stats, Google commands roughly 90% of the worldwide search engine market as of August. To put that in context, Microsoft's Bing, which most people would consider the next logical alternative, holds less than 4% of the market. The competition isn't even close. This raises a fascinating question. If Apple had been forced to abandon Google, would they have settled for a dramatically inferior search experience? Or would they have been compelled to build their own search engine from scratch? Eddie Q, Apple's senior vice president of services, provided some revealing insights in court documents from the previous year. He made it crystal clear that developing an internal search engine isn't on Apple's roadmap, explaining that the company is channeling its resources toward other growth opportunities. More tellingly, he characterized such an endeavor as economically risky, especially considering how artificial intelligence is rapidly reshaping the entire search landscape. But here's where the Department of Justice's case gets really interesting and, frankly, a bit uncomfortable for Google. The central question that prosecutors raised cuts to the heart of Google's success. Is Google the world's most popular search engine because it genuinely provides the best results, or simply because it's the path of least resistance for users who encounter it as the default option on their devices? Apple's own testimony provided a surprisingly candid answer that might make Google executives squirm. During his 2023 courtroom appearance, Q admitted something that challenges the narrative of Google's superiority. Certainly, there wasn't a valid alternative to Google at the time. Notice he didn't say Google was necessarily the best, just that there weren't viable alternatives. However, the landscape is shifting beneath everyone's feet, and this is where things get really fascinating. While traditional chatbots like ChatGPT aren't completely replacing search engines yet, they're beginning to chip away at Google's dominance in ways that seemed impossible just a few years ago. Gartner, a well-respected market research firm, made a bold prediction last year that should have every search company paying attention. They estimate that search engine usage will plummet by 25% by 2026 as consumers increasingly turn to AI-powered tools for their information needs. The evidence is already starting to appear in Apple's own data. Q revealed in court testimony that Google search queries on Apple devices actually decreased for the first time in April, a potentially seismic shift that nobody saw coming. Though Google disputed this claim, stating they continue to see overall query growth, including increases from Apple devices, the mere fact that this debate is happening signals significant changes ahead. Google isn't sitting idle while these changes unfold. The company has been aggressively expanding its AI mode feature to all U.S. Google app users earlier this year, essentially acknowledging that artificial intelligence is fundamentally transforming how people seek and consume information online. This brings us to Apple's strategic crossroads. The company will inevitably need to adapt to this AI-driven transformation to maintain its relevance in the search and information discovery space. Industry reports suggest they're already exploring fascinating possibilities, including internal discussions about potentially acquiring Perplexity, an innovative AI search startup that's been making waves in the industry. Q's testimony provided additional glimpses into Apple's thinking about the future. He acknowledged that AI services from companies like OpenAI, Perplexity, and Anthropic could eventually supplant traditional search methods entirely. He even suggested that Apple might eventually integrate these AI-powered options directly into Safari, giving users alternatives to conventional search. But here's the beautiful irony of Tuesday's ruling. Apple now has the luxury of time. Instead of being forced into hasty decisions about search alternatives, they can carefully strategize and implement changes according to their own timeline and vision. So here's my question for you. Do you think Google's continued dominance in search is genuinely earned through superior technology and results? Or is it primarily maintained through strategic default placements and user habit? And more controversially, should Apple be required to offer users more prominent choices about their default search engine? Or is the current system actually serving consumers well? The answers to these questions will likely shape the next decade of how we find and consume information online. What's your take? Are we witnessing the beginning of the end for traditional search? Or will Google's dominance prove more resilient than AI optimists predict?